going to get going then. So welcome everyone who's joining today from far-flung parts of the UK, and welcome to this Wednesday afternoon service design takeaway, and welcome to SPARK. So if you are aware of SPARK, I'll just do this properly. We are a design and innovation agency, and we exist to make positive change. We believe in the power of creativity and people-centric design to explore new opportunities and to navigate the unknown. And above all, we are here to help technology serve people and the planet better. So I'll introduce myself very briefly because this is not about me, but I'm Kat. I'm a service designer and culture lead at SPARK, and I am here to be the host for today. So today we will have 6 incredible service designers, and they have got some tasty nuggets of practical advice about service design. We're really pushing the takeaway metaphor. I hope you can all see that. So together we'll be unboxing some of the myths, methods, and mindsets of the discipline, and you'll leave the session with plenty of takeaways to experiment with in your own practice. So here are some of the names of our incredible service designers. You can see their faces as well on the screen. And first up, we have the rules of the game. So we do have 6 talks, but everyone is only going to have 5 minutes each. And they will have 5 minutes to share those tasty insights and top tips, and to make sure that they keep on track with the timings. I'm going to be timing them, and at 3 minutes, they're going to see this change in background. At 4 minutes, they're going to see this, and then at 5 minutes, we're going to the grill. It's this one. So if they go over 5 minutes, I will cut them short, and that is to make sure that 1, we have some kind of jeopardy that makes it a little bit more exciting, and 2, that we have time at the end for Q&A. So throughout, if there's any questions that you have for our incredible service designers on anything that they are talking about, please drop it in the Q&A. So on your Zoom, you'll have a little Q&A icon. I'll be collecting up all of those Q&A, all of those questions for the end, and then we'll have a bit of a panel discussion at the end where you'll have an opportunity to ask people lots of questions. So let's get straight into it. First up, we have Kerry Hughes, and Kerry Hughes is on a mission to make things better by employing human-centered design and design thinking approaches. Her Sparky superpower, which I can attest to, is listening, and her talk is entitled Once More with Feeling: The Role of Emotions in Service Design and How to Use Them in As-Is and To-Be Design. Once more with feeling, I'll hand over to you, Kerry.
Thank you, Kat. We can scroll on to the next slide. I will begin. Okay, so 5 minutes, didn't practice, may go over. Just putting that out there. Okay, so emotions matter. I think this slide sums it up beautifully. People get bogged down in data. I'm going to talk about emotion. 80% of our lives are consumed by emotion. So I began my career back in 2001, working in customer experience. And I sort of saw this firsthand. I'd go out with the field sales agents. This was pre-internet people. We had to go and knock door to door to get people to change energy provider. And what I really noticed was that people weren't driven by a need to save money or to switch provider. They were driven by their emotional needs. Most of the people that we managed to sort of switch provider wanted to talk to us about something was going on in their life. They wanted to seek company, something like that. So it's really struck me that emotion was a really vital part. Next slide, please. So a core skill of any service designer is empathy. And to be empathetic, you've got to understand emotions. Some people are naturally more empathetic. However, good news, researchers have discovered that empathy can be developed through practice. Good news again, as service designers, we continually in our day-to-day work practice this. This wheel is developed by psychologist Robert Pluchik. Go visit that site, 6seconds.org, and have a look at it, because it's a really nice sort of introduction to emotions. But, you know, essentially, key things for designers: emotions start before an interaction has even taken place. It's psychological and physiological. And as designers, we must be aware of our own biases when we're designing, and put our empathy hats on. Next slide, please. Got to remember to move my notes over. So service designers love to map, and a key starting point in gaining empathy is the customer journey map. I have seen firsthand many examples of very poor journey maps. They can be process maps with a customer swim lane. They can focus purely on the rational. They can include emotion, but it's generic, happy, sad, and very often they're assumptive, so they haven't been validated with or co-created with customers or the end user at all. So what does good look like? Good obviously captures the rational, but a really key part is emotional. When you do these mapping, always get that rich data of what are you thinking, what are you feeling. Try and get one line sort of thinking and feeling, one word. And then post the customer journey mapping session, you're going to start looking for the subconscious bits below this and the psychological bits. And this is where behavioral science really comes in and can be really helpful in your customer journey mapping. Obviously, loads more to unpack in this. We don't have time. Next slide, please. Okay, so when we're designing our 2B, a really great tool that's taken from the sort of theatrical storytelling world is the dramatic arc. And this is, I like to refer to it as the boom, wow, wow, boom. So essentially, when we're thinking about an experience and we're thinking about the emotions, we really need to think about the moments that matter. Not every moment has to be hectic action movie, but we need to just really think about where the emotions are important, where it's important to be calm, to make people feel secure, all those sorts of things. So remember that emotions will be reactive and proactive. Base it on research and choose where to focus on the emotions. So be intentional with it. I'm doing quite well, I think. I'm still green. Okay. I'm going to leave you, so I'm going to give more people time. So I'm going to leave you with an amazing quote from an amazing woman. And I love this, and I hope you do too. So basically, Maya Angelou said, "I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." I leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, really coming in on time. So much packed in. More time for other people. So next up, going straight into it, we have Anne Deere. And Anne is a design strategist with a knack for joining up things that seemingly have nothing in common. Her sparky superpower is starting way too many sentences with, "I had an idea." And her talk is entitled "License to Kill a Service," which I think probably wins the prize for the best named talk today. Apologies to everyone else. We talk about designing and creating services, but have you ever considered what a service graveyard might look like? How do you kill or retire a service? So Anne, I'll hand over to you with a license to kill.
Thanks, Kat. Apologies in advance. I am pushing the metaphor way too far in this talk, but I had fun doing it. So I hope that will brighten your Wednesday afternoon in a slightly creepy way. But anyway, we're service designers. We design, we create. That's in our DNA. But we think we're so good at it, there's absolutely no way that users would want to stop using a service we created, or that an organization might have the idea that they no longer want to provide the service. So while I talk through it, it would be nice to hear from you. If you want to move on to the next slide, how many of you have actually worked on retiring a service? So if you just want to drop it in the chat, that would be really lovely. I might even get in touch with you to do a bit more research on this. But if you want to go in the meantime, if you want to go to the next slide, let's have a look at a few examples. So some services have a sell by date by nature, like the income support schemes that were created during the pandemic. We all hope they would come to an end at some point. For others, it's sudden death, like when Tesco shut down its Tesco Direct service one day. Sometimes it's an element of the service that becomes redundant. And now that, for example, entire primary school children, entire years of primary school children get a free school meal, why would their family bother applying in the first place? I'm a little bit curious about the example you see in health about Whipple disease. Do people not get Whipple disease anymore? It's on discontinued service. Is it a discontinued disease? So if you wanted to look at the next slide, how do you retire a service? Do you just press delete, unplug it? GDS as a handy guide, and it's a great place to start, but it doesn't have everything. But after this talk, go and have a look. The truth is, on the next slide, is that services never die. They don't really die. You can always make freedom of information request. Fraud could be prosecuted. How long you need to keep elements of a service alive depends on the nature of the service, obviously. But when I was doing some research, I noticed 6 years often comes back. So for example, for GDPR, the default data retention is the current year plus 6. You can make a claim for a faulty product for 5 of 6 years, depending on where you live. And previous schemes is an example. So if you've received a grant to insulate your home, you can't reapply under a new scheme to re-insulate your home. But that implies that the organization has kept data on what you applied in the first place, so that they can judge that. So as you see, the challenge, if you accept it, centers a lot around data. You need access to data. You need to be able to answer questions. The data needs to be of sufficient quality with sufficient context information. You need platform, you need people, so you need a service. So you need service design, you need user research so that you can understand the user needs, in particular the needs of the future staff who will be asked to answer questions about a service they know very little about, if they know anything. So it's a dead service, but it's still a service. You're still creating a new service. I'm moving on to the next one, really pushing it now. You need an executor team. And so it's service design, but with added challenges. People leave, your project team will dwindle. So you have to onboard new staff, new team members at the same time as you're winding down the project. But that also means that organizational and service knowledge leaves. So when in Agile, we talk about just enough documentation, well, that takes on a whole different meaning. Another issue is around the business case. You'll serve a handful of transactions at best. So the cost to serve is really high, but the cost of doing nothing is even higher. Just as a reminder, GDPR infringement can cost up to £17.5 million in the UK, or 4% of your global turnover. But you also need to look at the implication on the system, on the whole system. Few services exist in isolation. So for example, we give the example of free school meal. The number of children on free school meal is used to calculate the pupil premium. So if people don't apply for free school meal anymore, how do you calculate it? It's difficult. So designing in this context is about shutting things down, but you need to do it legally, promptly, efficiently, and sustainably. User needs must be met, but it might not be as elegant as it normally is. Next slide. Looking at the lesson learned, we'd say there's a few things we can look at. Talk about it early, just like in life, considering how we would decommission the service at the point where we're setting it up. We might actually set it up differently with the decommissioning in mind. So you can imagine it as a workshop activity in Alpha to tell us your design. Or if you're in the role of writing requests for proposals, well, ask the question in the brief and see what you get back. Kill little and often. It's not just during the design process that you need to slim down your service and look at this retirement. You need to look at what data we ask for but don't use. What are out-of-date website pages? The slimmer your service, the easier it will be to retire. Address the edge cases. I can see you you're getting orange, very bright orange, but address the edge cases. So what are the outlier in your processing time, for example, the cases with the highest number of bounce back? cumulatively, they build like service debt, just like you have technical debt, and it reduces your ability to manage your service strategically and retire it eventually. But also consider the legacy of previously retired services. Kerry talked about emotions. Well, when you start a new project, start researching what other services might have existed in the past that might impact people's emotion in how they deal with your service. Boom.
Thank you. A little bit over, but so interesting. I couldn't stop you. I couldn't, even if I tried. I've met you. So next up we have Harriet's talk. So Harriet is mad about plants, but even madder about all the bad design in the world. And her sparky superpower is starting a conversation with, did you know? I feel like, obviously Harriet and Anne have some great conversations, just the way that they start every sentence. And her talk is entitled Everyday Service Failure, how recognizing bad services in your everyday life will help you design for greater good. So everyday service failure, handing over to you, Harriet.
Thanks, Kat. If you could go to the next slide, please. There are a couple of memes in here. I thought that might lighten up the subject slightly. So if I were to tell you that in 2009, Airbnb had a monthly turnover of $200 and were on the brink of bankruptcy, you'd probably not believe me. But the Airbnb team knew that it wasn't the idea that they had that was bad, or that the product itself was terrible. People actually really loved it. Their problem was that the details that Airbnb relied on their users to provide, such as the photography and the listing information, just really, really sucked. So the elements of their service that were failing them were actually the elements that they couldn't control. And Airbnb's failure was not about a poorly designed digital experience. Their failure was about believing that their digital product equaled a comprehensive service. So if we fast forward and we can now see that Airbnb offers, as part of their service, the ability to link up hosts and professional photographers in an area, for example. And they've also redesigned their profiles pages to make it easier for hosts to select what facilities they offer. So these changes that have been informed by rigorous research, testing, and iteration have meant that Airbnb is now worth over $100 billion, which is just insane considering that they were on the brink of bankruptcy. Next slide, please. But most of the time, we don't even realize that we've fallen victim to service failure, because the majority of us, for the majority of us, these moments are just minor inconveniences in our day. But service failure is everywhere if you just start looking for it. We encounter things like no-touch flushes in public bathrooms, which are supposed to be hygienic, only to turn around and have to touch a dirty lock as we exit that probably never gets cleaned. We find bins that have been left on the pavement after the council's been round to collect them, which is fine if you're able-bodied and can maneuver around them, but it's really challenging if you're a parent with a stroller or you're a wheelchair user. Similarly, we have things like iconography on our appliances and our built environments that are there to help people navigate in a language that's supposed to be universal. But symbolism in one culture may take on a completely different meaning in another, hence the need to interrogate design solutions as the context change. We encounter things like bad vending machine coffee, tax forms, 404 messages on websites, unexpected items in the bagging area. And really the list of service failure is endless when you really start to pay attention. Next slide, please. But there are also services that aren't tangible in a physical sense. We can only experience them at the mercy of the service provider. And when a service is purely experiential, as many of today's services are increasingly becoming, if they're designed poorly, it becomes colossally harder for a person to navigate, understand, and have their needs met. Many examples of these can be found in the public realms of local government departments, for example, where the nexus of bureaucracy, policy, and Neolithic technology combine in this sort of perfect storm to create experiences that are just really frustrating and confusing. In the UK, 80% of government funds are spent on delivering services, and that's a lot of public money to spend on failure. So bad design is sometimes intentional as well. Like making asylum applications as complicated as possible to dissuade only the most enduring and resilient of applicants. But often bad design is completely unintentional, and it's engineered by the very services genuinely wanting to provide value in meeting people's needs. So service failure occurs because often services aren't designed at all. They grow organically and they happen by accident. And ultimately, when services fail in this category, the consequences can quite literally be the difference of life and death. Next slide, please. So how do you then design a service that's not at the whim of things like political agendas, technological constraints, and assumptions that are made by well-meaning people? Well, among other things, service designers do this through a number of ways. We do it through engagement with real users and evidence-based decision-making. We do this by making sure the right stakeholders are involved at key stages. We do this by revealing the true cost of failure through design tools and activities. But most importantly, we reveal the financial, social, and human cost of doing absolutely nothing. So if you do want to learn more about how to design better services, I'd recommend that you read Lou Downs' book, Good Services. You'll also find a cheat sheet in that book about principles for what good service design looks like. But I've also included some other resources that I personally found really useful in my journey into becoming a service designer, and hopefully you'll find them really useful as well. And I will stop there because I've got the flaming fires of hell at my feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, agree. Good Services, excellent book. Although really poorly designed, which I always thought was very odd. Found it very difficult to read. Enough about me. So next up we have Toby. So Toby loves to design things, be they brands, services, or vegetable patches. And his superpower, my favorite one, is the unicycle, which I just really hope is true. Excellent. And his talk title is The Tale of Two Perspectives, the two different brands which play a critical role in differentiating any service design project you work on. That's The Tale of Two Perspectives, and I'll hand over to you, Toby.
Thank you, Kat. So for this talk, I'm going to assume that many of you are in the line of work in service design or looking to get into a job in service design. So I'm going to ask you to take on a brief that I would typically get, and I'm going to place you into two different shoes. A, that of the brand of the client, and B, the brand of the agency that you could potentially work with to deliver this brief. So the next slide outlines this brief. Summer is upon us and holiday season is hotting up. As you're probably aware, the travel industry is complete chaos at the moment, and this is causing disruption. It's a big opportunity there for two new brands to enter the market. So your brief is to design their new travel offering. So the first brand on the next slide is Her Majesty's Government. So think about who Her Majesty's Government is. You know, what's their purpose? What's their vision? What are their values? Who are their users? What do you think their users want, expect, avoid? If you connect Her Majesty's Government, although it's tenuous, I agree, to the travel industry, what do you think it looks like? The second brand is Aston Martin. So do you think they've got a different target market to Her Majesty's Government? Do you think they've got different needs? Do you think their users have different pain points that need solving? Is there a different problem statement that they may be working off? Do you think the stakeholders that work for Aston Martin will have a different view of what that service should be? The next slide talks about the gap between these two. I would argue that there is quite a large gap. Hopefully you can see that as well. The government is about transparency. It's an open invitation to the entire general public. They value equality, inclusivity, accessibility. It's about simplifying all of the services so that everyone, regardless of colour, sex, creed, background, can fundamentally take part. It's about simplicity, doing less. Aston Martin, on the other hand, is more about mystery, mystique, exclusivity. They actually value positive discrimination. They don't want everyone to use their products or services, but they do want everyone to know about them. They do want everyone to want to use them, to aspire towards them. They're in the business of doing more. So that's the first perspective. The second perspective is that of the agency that you work for. So the next slide talks about 4 different agencies that you could potentially choose to work with. The first puts people first because we're humans, not robots. This is a very human-centric organization. They're going to be using lots of qualitative data through one-on-one interviews with users. They're going to be doing things like usability testing sessions and really understanding what the human needs out of the service. The second agency helps brands to move forward in technology and digital culture. So they're very culturally, very socially centric. They're using metadata on cultural trends, historical data, industry trends, competitive analysis. They're using all of this to crunch numbers and think about how they can design a service that is savvy. It's got the latest technological advancements. Perhaps they're using AI or VR. They're not necessarily so concerned with user need. As Henry Ford's mantra goes, if I asked the customer what they wanted, they'd ask for a faster horse, not a faster car. Agency 3, we use behavioral science to help companies bridge design and psychology to create better experiences for their customers. So here we've got a very quantitative, fairly abstract and removed objective position. Here they're likely using advanced software packages to crunch huge amounts of data, taking safety in numbers to make their decisions. If you think of online sites, gambling companies, airline sites, price comparison sites, they're often looking at how to use behavioral nudging to optimize the experience, probably for the KPIs set by the company, not necessarily the user needs. The final perspective is that of the system thinking. Helps us to consider the impact of design on human behaviors, society, and the environment. So here, this agency is starting to connect the dots, not only between the service, but also between society, the environment, the economy, law, policies, and they're starting to think consequentially about the implications of design on their service to all of the connected services. This is big picture thinking. They're using maps to sort of make sense of huge amounts of data and try and simplify quite complex pictures. So moving on to the next slide, as I'm aware, I'm over time now. There are 2 different perspectives, that of your client's brand that you need to honor and that of your agency's value proposition, which the brand will fundamentally buy into. It's your job to funnel both these perspectives through your own unique talents to create what will always be a unique and memorable service. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see you on that unicycle to celebrate an excellent talk. And next up, we have Steve. So Steve loves to figure out how things work and then how to make things better. His superpower is being able to describe design using a sandwich metaphor, which I welcome at all times. And his talk is titled A Business Analyst's Journey into Service Design. You'll need more than just design-oriented skills to flourish as a service designer. And Steve is here to tell us a little bit more about that. So business analyst's journey into service design. I'll hand over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Kat. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, I don't. The sandwich, the design sandwich, isn't going to make an appearance in this talk. So sadly, it'll be for another time. So as the title suggests, I made the transition from being a BA to a service designer. And I thought it'd be helpful telling my story for those also seeking to make a similar move, or not just from the BA background, but also from any background for that matter. So next slide, please. So I was a BA in the banking industry for 15 years, and then moved into consultancy, doing a combo of BA and UX roles initially. The move into service design was born more out of frustration, essentially. It wasn't an obvious next step for me, but in fact, I enjoyed being a business analyst, and it fit with my analytical nature. Next slide, please. I was finding that as a BA or UXer, I was inhibited from seeing the bigger picture. And also we were often tasked with delivering specific predetermined features and changes, which were not necessarily the right thing to build, particularly for the end users. So discovering service design was a bit of a revelation, actually. Being able to bust silos and using collaboration and co-design, using evidence-based design to feed into the design process was very appealing to me. Next slide. And there seemed to be a pretty good fit with my particular skill set to the service design role, but it's not a perfect overlap, though. Being a UXer, at least venturing into the UX world for a couple of years, was a good way of preparing me for what I needed to subsequently work on. Next slide, please. And this is kind of my take on what it means to be a service designer. So I came to understand that to be successful as a service designer, I needed to adopt two different mindsets and related skill sets. As a BA, I could easily bring the analytical mindset to my work, being detail oriented and able to explore the inner workings of organizations and being delivery focused. But I was also learning how to adopt the designer mindset in my work by being more empathetic with customers and stepping into the workshopping space a lot more heavily as a means of collaboration, and that aspect was one of the more fun and fulfilling aspects of what I was doing. So these two mindsets is sort of described here. I won't read them. You can see them for what they are. They are effectively two sides of the same coin for me as a service designer. And I continually to sort of flip between the two in order to deliver sort of the best results for clients and for the end users. Next slide, please. This is going to be a quick one, Kat. So essentially, this kind of goes to that sort of statement that Kat mentioned up front, which is the sort of wraps up my thinking around this. You'll need to be more than just design skills to flourish as a service designer. You also need good analytical and business skills and organizational knowledge. And this applies to anyone coming into service design, whether they're coming from a design background or an analytical background. And we've had a huge amount of growth at Spark and this industry over the last couple of years in the service design area. And everybody should be who's interested in making a difference to customers and to even to human experiences, then this is the right field for them to be in. This is a field which we can begin to build the right things for them. So by all means, if you're interested in service design as a next step, whether you're BA or otherwise, reach out to us, because I think it's something that takes a multitude of skills, and we welcome everybody's input. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This is just, it's almost like we planned it, because our next talk really follows on that theme. So our next talk is from Thaddeus, and Thaddeus is a firm believer in the power of service design to make the world a better place, one service at a time. His Sparky superpower is a somewhat controversial ability to apply the service design lens to almost any aspect of his life. And his talk is entitled Tortoise or the Hare? Fast or slow, there are many routes to becoming a service designer. So this is our final talk for today. So please do ask any questions if you have them, because we will have time at the end for a bit of a panel Q&A discussion. So pop the questions in, and I'll hand over to Thad now. Tortoise or the hare?
Thank you. Right, so next slide, please. So most of us know Aesop's fable about the tortoise and hare that had a race. The hare sprinted off, thought he'd have plenty of time because he was so quick, and took a nap. And while he was asleep, the tortoise ambled past and beat the hare to the finish line. The moral of that story being slow and steady wins the race. So the story I hope I'm telling today is a little different. To start the story off, I want to quickly tell you a little bit about us. Next slide, please. So I'm the service design practice lead at Spark. The practice has been going for 5 or 6 years now, depending on your perspective. We've delivered game-changing experiences along the way, across gov, health, social care, private and charity sectors, although more in gov and healthcare over the past 2 years as part of that response to the COVID pandemic. All of which we're immensely proud of. But I'm also proud to lead a team of awesome, clever, inspired and inspiring service designers. And I'm excited almost every day because I'm learning from great minds. We're 28 strong now, right, in these locations you see here in red. Next slide, please. And all sorts of qualifications represented in our team. Music, psychology, philosophy, to social anthropology and spatial planning and more besides, as well as the more obviously relevant stuff like design innovation and service design degrees. More often than not, it was a winding road that our service designers found themselves on in different careers, some not so clearly related to service design. As you can see here, and I did a little poll with our team yesterday to show you that. And certainly that was the case for me. I operated for years doing elements of service design without even realizing that that is what it was. It was a revelation for me to discover the profession and adopt the title. But most importantly, though, once I started hanging out with other service designers, my knowledge and expertise just grew exponentially. And I'm sure the same would go for anyone here. Next slide, please. But whatever way we've arrived at service design, there are some common challenges that rained on our parade along the way. Some of these will likely be familiar to you. So not realizing service design was even a thing, as I've mentioned. Having limited access to users during our work. Understanding the scope, remit, and limitations of service design. Finding opportunities when, after graduating with a degree, or gaining experience when switching careers. And having imposter syndrome when we did. Next slide, please. But whether your route to service design feels like a pretty straight line, straight out the gate with a directly relevant degree, knowing that this is what you want to do, or a longer winding road, if you find yourself looking above the parapet, beyond the immediate obvious project boundaries, or seeing the bigger picture and working at both macro and micro scales, connecting strategy with design adoption, or building bridges with stakeholders across relevant organizations and involving them throughout, or involving users in understanding the problem and defining the solution, facilitating design, bringing the right people in, and being aware that design is a team sport, then you're likely to be doing something akin to service design. And if you have a relentless curiosity about people and technology in particular, and are always looking to understand how they can best work together, if you have a drive to make things better and are excited by the opportunity to improve the lives of people in some way, then you probably have the right mindset. Next slide. Okay, so saying that, but so what? Well, we're growing as we get involved in solving more complex problems in all sorts of different places. We have more exciting candidates in the pipeline, But I'm hoping that at least some of you here now, or viewing this later, will want to be part of our exciting future. We also know it's challenging for new grads to get their feet in the door. So we're looking to create a service design course to sit alongside a very successful product design course at our Spark Academy. We're currently recruiting to the locations you see here in red, and we'll grow across all of these and more soon enough. Next slide. So to wrap up, everyone on our team, whatever their level of experience, is there for a reason. We all learn from each other, experiment and adapt our own practice. That is what keeps it fresh, interesting, and effective. That's what helps us as a design organization change the lives of people for the better. Wherever you end up, I hope that this is true for you. Whether you consider yourself a tortoise or a hare, in this analogy, you can win the race. Check out our website, see what we've got going on. I'm always happy to chat, geek out about service design. So if you want a virtual coffee, tap me up. Thank you. And I hope to see some of you soon.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. They were our 6 service design takeaways. So I'm going to stop sharing now so you can see all our faces in full, and see if anyone has any questions. So we do have one, which I can put to the team, and see how people respond. So the first question, the first question is not a question, but just, a highlight that Harriet's memes were a delight. Do you have any response, Harriet?
Yeah, I can see that they weren't mine. I definitely stole them. I think like any great artiste, good ones borrow. No, what's the expression? Good ones make their own, great ones steal. Anyways, that's a new expression that I made up. But yeah, I got them from the Service Design Memes Instagram page, and it's great if you want a good laugh.
Thank you. Yeah, that is really good advice. Yeah, I do consider myself a pirate, as in I do steal quite a lot of things. And I think that's totally acceptable. So the next question is from Mariana, and I'm going to put this one to Steve first. So as a user researcher, how can you get skills in service design?
How can you get skills in service design? Well, I mean, there is external courses and stuff out there that weren't there when I began this journey, by all means. So I think that some of them are really, really good. I don't know some off the top of my head, but it's a good search. We'll find some. In terms of, I mean, there's loads and loads of books that we've got a list of books that might be useful for people to explore. And I'll lean on Thad for maybe supplying a list or whatever. But as a researcher, I think you're right in the middle of it. So you are at the forefront of user-centric design. So I think it's a huge skill. And as a service designer, I needed to learn lots about user research that I didn't otherwise know. So you've got a leg up on most people who are interested in it. But first and foremost, yeah, just start educating, read as much as you can, absorb, do some online training or whatever, or in-class training.
Thanks. Would anyone else like to pipe up with some advice for our user researcher?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a user researcher, you must be involved in a project of sorts, and research has to go somewhere. So you're going to be working with a designer, service designer, developer, whoever else you might have on a project team. So you're going to be involved in the synthesis with them. I would hope, and what that means. And I think you also have at least partly a responsibility to make sure that the needs you've uncovered and said are important are actually carried through in design. And I think if your designers are doing the right job, they'll be involving you in the ideation as well, because it's a team game. So you have an opportunity to get exposed to all that kind of work.
definitely agree. Anyone else? No. Does anyone else have any questions who are in the webinar? If they wanted to write in the Q&A, we can ask. Otherwise, I would just kind of riffing off your session, Thad, ask people, you know, what their kind of winding road was to service design, and if anyone has had a real transfer like Steve has.
I'd be curious to find out who comes from a design background on this, on our set, versus who doesn't, because I think most of us, well, most of you, because I don't obviously do. So, and where do you come from? Which background?
I've got a political science degree, hence the asking why all the time. But my first job was as a BA.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, so merged the two skills to become a service designer and strategist.
Yeah, similarly, I think I did a degree in graphic design and communications, went into all sorts really. I went into customer experience design in the aviation sector, and then I went into branding and cold hard strategy, and was always a little bit frustrated that it didn't actually bear fruit. It was very ethereal, so that kind of led me into, well, how do you do something that has a little bit more impact that you can actually also sort of experience day to day. And so I had a design background that led me into this, but just by virtue of the teams that are built at companies like SPARCK and BJSS, you're going to be surrounded by people from very sort of data and analytical backgrounds, and engineering backgrounds, and other people from very sort of design-led backgrounds. And the sort of the cohesion element of how we work and the sort of the philosophies that we bring into it are very good at, I suppose, sharing the knowledge that everyone has. And that's a kind of, I'd say, a crucial part of any service design project you work on, is to understand how you can also get the most out of your team, but also learn their own background and reap all the insights that they have to offer too.
I'll add, I think you'll know if you'll make it as a service designer, because when services fail you, like in Harriet's talk, you don't just go, oh, God's sake. You go, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do this? They could have done that. They could have done this. And so essentially, you'll be thinking about the problems, but thinking about how you could make them better. It's very frustrating as a service designer sometimes, because you can't stop doing it. And my husband will be like, oh, can we not do this again? Because, yeah, and tying in my talk and Harriet's talk, before I came on this today, I got a really helpful, text from HSBC Bank telling me that I'd missed my credit card payment date. So emotion-wise, I now hate them, because they could have texted me before, clearly got my number to tell me that I was at my due date. So it's like, now I hate them and want to move my money. There we go. That's my penny's worth.
Thank you. We do have a couple. I also hate everything all the time, I think, because I'm a service designer, or maybe because of who I am. But they have two questions that have just come through. And the first one is actually about user research. So what are the core abilities of being a user researcher? I think this came from a previous question of thinking that kind of about that transference skill. So was it you, Steve, who was talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Being genuinely interested in human beings is a really good first start, because you've got to be able to be curious enough to sort of go in there and ask, and really just be a listener and be somebody who wants to find out more. But really, it's good to listen and sort of absorb all that information from them. But at some point, you have to distill it, and being organized is really, really important. And be able to sort of sift through that information that you get for the purpose at which is at hand. So definitely organization, analytical to sift through all that, develop insights from the observations that you're getting, and just being immensely curious.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have another question from William. I'm currently a data engineer, but have a creative background. What would be your suggestion for a career change? I was wondering if Anne, you wanted to take this one.
Yeah, interesting. I helped recently someone who was interested in changing from architecture to service design. The way we approached it is we looked at the things they enjoyed doing, that they were particularly good at, that their team were coming to them for support, or because they have recognized skills, and then looked at the skills that are expected of a service designer. And there's loads of information in job ads over there, out there that you can use, and try to match the two and see where are the overlaps and where are the skills that you can transfer from one to the other. And the second thing is declare your intention. If you want to transfer from one organization, from one skill set or one type of profile to another, just approach the company either you work with or us or any other to say, this is my profile, this is where I want to go, is there an interest? And service design is a very sought after skill. So a lot of companies will support you through that transition, and there might be a project where it's a perfect fit. So declare your intention and look at the skills that are matched between the two.
Great advice. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that?
Only the fact that if they, as a data engineer, they've obviously got some good analytical aspects and thinking to them. So I think that bodes them very well to that analytical mindset I think you need in order to sort of dig deep, figure out things, understand how things are connected. It's almost that systems thinking mindset. And I think that goes a long way to being a good service designer. But again, like I was trying to get across, is that you need that other set of skills that really bring it all together, and empathetic and things that you're trying to do things around a purpose, and rallying and collaborating and co-designing. All those things, you can learn them. You might learn them like I do, bringing an analytical mindset to it rather than other. I won't qualify what that might be, but yeah, I think just if you're interested, if you're really keen, then there's lots of information out there for people to study and get up to speed on this field.
Yeah, the other thing that I'd add on to that is picking the organization that you apply to. I'm not in your shoes, but it may be that you've applied to a few service design jobs. Sometimes the recruiters can be very discriminative, maybe the wrong word, but if you're not ticking all the right boxes, they may not be that receptive. Sometimes you can get into organizations in a particular role that you may have all the skills, and then you can be on a team and you can demonstrate that actually all these skills do transfer, and then you can pick up a new role in that organization. So in this company, I've taken on quite a few different roles, which I'm sure if I applied for that role straight away, they would have said, there's no chance, you don't have the skills and we're not ticking all the right boxes. But as soon as you're there, as soon as you're in the team and you're actually making friends with people across different capabilities and having conversations with them, that in itself opens doors. So yeah, I'd say get your foot in the door with a company that you like the look of, and then express your intent, and then that will help you to transition.
Definitely. I've definitely done that a few times as well. So I'm conscious of the time, and I don't know if we can answer any more questions in the time we have. So someone shared something else, which was also very useful. Share away. So yeah, I just want to finish by thanking everyone who's been watching. Thank you for your questions, and also thank you to Thad, Kerry, Toby, Steve, and Harriet. I really appreciate spending this time with you. And as we said before, we are hiring service designers in Sheffield. So if you are interested in working with us and many other excellent people, then apply. So thanks everyone. I hope you have a great dreary Wednesday evening. Bye everyone.
Bye.
Fun. Thank you.